But the other function to the dipping sauce is actually to act as a cooling agent. So if you are having like a Szechuan style spicy hot pot, as one of your soup bases, what you could do is you could actually use a lot more of the creamier sauces in your dipping sauce in order for you to actually cool off some of that heat that comes in. So really, really fun. I mean, creating your dipping sauce is super fun. And, it's also a chance for you to explore different types of flavors, what I call explosions in your mouth, because different levels of and different combinations can form different little surprises. And the fourth thing is actually the art of cooking your ingredients. As you know, I'm totally like, one of those like people who break it down to a science, whenever I'm eating. As if you haven't heard my bubble tea episode last week, I highly recommend it because there is an art to literally how you eat and drink. Right. So Asian people, we are so, I guess, in some ways, we see it as an art form. So we are very systematic in some of the ways that we approach food. And hot pot is nonetheless one of those as well. So, what you would want to do when you are presented with a plethora of different spreads of ingredients, what you want to do is the first thing that you want to pop into your hot pot soup is hard vegetables, carrots, root vegetables that maybe require a little bit more time to cook. Those are the um, first things that I usually pop into there. Like daikon is one of those things I love to pop in at the beginning. Now, there's another reason why, and this is sort of a little bit of a science because carrots and daikon and root vegetables, what they do is they make your broth heartier and they bring a sweetness out of that broth that you probably won't get from just the bones and the basic ingredients that you've had, unless you've already added carrots to your soup base. But yeah, so that's one of the first things that I would pop in there. And the thing is, carrots and daikon, the longer you cook them, the better they taste. I mean, the flavors fully soak up the broth and it's just so delicious. So that's another reason why I would put those in first, because you can take your time. To eat those. Now, the second thing that I would put into my hot pot soup is tofu and dumplings. Again, tofu soaks up the flavor like no tomorrow the longer you cook it in the broth. So it is so delicious if you pop it in at the beginning and then you get to kind of eat it like halfway or later in your hot pot experience. Dumplings generally are going to be either frozen or if they're freshly made, there's still a lot of raw ingredients inside. So you want to make sure you cook it thoroughly. So tofu and dumplings, once again, they both soak up the flavor of the broth beautifully. And also it's a great, ingredient that you can, just take your time cooking and there's no rush. Now, the ones that you actually want to be kind of keeping an eye on is your slices of meat as well as your seafood. And so this is where you would use the sort of, what was that thing that I said? The little tool that we use. It's kind of like a strainer, but it's got really big holes. So meats and seafood, especially if you're cooking like oysters or shrimp or prawns, it's best to use the ladles or the strainer so that you don't lose your shrimp because overcooked shrimp doesn't taste very good, right? And oysters generally take a little bit longer because they're, raw and you really don't want to eat like uncooked oyster. And again, oysters will soak up the soup base so beautifully. So oysters versus shrimp, oysters you can leave in there quite a bit longer. I'd say in terms of like timing, oysters will take about 5 to 10 minutes to cook thoroughly in like piping hot boiling soup, whereas shrimp takes anywhere between 1.5 to 2 minutes, depending on the size of your shrimp and prawns. So meats generally cook real fast. So you literally you don't need the strainers. You could probably just use your chopsticks. And for some of us, who aren't eating with family, if you're eating with friends or so, we have these guest chopsticks, which we call gong kuai or gong fai in Cantonese, gong kuai in Mandarin. What gong kuai means is gong meaning public or guest, um, and kuai meaning kuaizi as in chopsticks. And the reason for that is just for courtesy's sake, because some people may not want you to have eaten from your chopsticks and then you're dipping your chopsticks right into the hot pot. Although if it's within your own family, it's probably not that big of a deal. But if you have guests over or you have some friends who, maybe are just a little bit more sort of formal, they probably would appreciate you having the gong kwai there for them. And last but not least, you would put in your noodles. Now, the reason why I recommend putting in noodles last is because a lot of times when you're using fresh noodles, they'll soak up the broth, but not just the flavor, but they'll actually soak up physically your soup. And so, if you cook noodles for too long, you'll run out of soup, and also, it will also get all mushy. So you don't want to be eating noodles at the beginning of your meal. Like it's nice to have, a little bit of noodles here and there. So you can use your strainer if you just want to cook like little bits of it. But if you want to have a nice bowl of noodles, I recommend doing it at the end where you have some ingredients left and then you can enjoy yourself a bowl of noodle soup with beautiful ingredients. And, then you can really, taste the grand finale of that concoction of the transformed broth that started off as a very basic soup base and has transformed itself with all the different ingredients that you've cooked in there. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea as to, I'm salivating just as I'm describing this because I'm like, wow, I'm bringing back myself to, when we had hot pot last, and I am like, I'm ready for another hot pot meal. I'm always ready for a hot pot meal. Like just like, bubble tea, it is one of my favorite go-tos. So what I wanted to ask you is, well, now that you know how hot pot works, and now that you've also got a little bit of the science behind it and the history behind it, who are you going to enjoy a hot pot meal with next? Well, Healthy Wisdomers, it has been such a pleasure to share another episode with you. I'd like you to take a minute and subscribe, follow, and rate this episode so that we can share in the wisdom and also have more people join us on this journey. This is the Healthy Wisdom series with Dr. Jen Chen. I look forward to seeing you guys next week.